Welcome to the Enlightened Pet Behavior Podcast. I'm your host, Susan Light. In a world overflowing with conflicting advice and often misguided information, my mission is to be your trusted source for accurate, kind, and truly effective strategies to understand and shape your pet's behavior. Join me as we shed light on common behavior challenges and work to foster a deeper, more harmonious bond with our beloved furry family members. If you find the show helpful and enjoyable, please consider showing your support. Take a second to subscribe, follow, rate, review, and share the show with your friends. It just takes a second, but it significantly boosts the show's visibility and helps more pet parents discover it. Thank you so much. Today, we're talking about rattlesnake avoidance training. If you spend time outdoors with your dog in the summertime, it's something you might want to consider. But old school training uses shock collars to make dogs afraid of the snakes. There's a better way, a way that doesn't cause fear or pain. And to tell us all about it is a Las Vegas based trainer, behavior consultant, and master's candidate in applied animal behavior and welfare. Please welcome Eileen Koval. Well, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and talking about snake avoidance.
Yeah, how did you get into that kind of training?
Well, I it was something that's never on my radar until we moved from Florida to Las Vegas when my husband was in the military, and I was just petrified about, my dog that I had at the time. That I just figured there's rattlesnakes everywhere, that they'd be in my backyard, which really wasn't the case. You do see them, but they're not everywhere like that. And I just really wasn't sure what to do because, they have the common shock collar based ones, but there was no way I was gonna do that with her, and she's already an anxious girl to begin with, but it was not something that would ever be on my radar. But, I knew that wasn't really ever going to be an option for us. So I was like, there's gotta be ways to do this. And she was already a dog that did some low blood sugar alert for me. So I was like, so I was like, if there's an odor, there's gotta be a way to do this. And I was somebody that had always heard that, "Oh, it's not possible, like, shock is the only way to do this." And I was, talking with some other trainers and who were saying, "Oh, people train this, positively." And I was doubtful, honestly, about it. I actually thought that maybe it's not because it's one of those things you hear so much that shock and punishment's the only way. There's gotta be fear. And so I thought, "Well, what the heck? I'm gonna go get some shedded snake skins that smell like a snake and see if we can put this to the test." And so I started documenting my training with I had 3 dogs at the time when I started training this, 3 Quakers, and I thought, "We'll see. We'll find out," and I couldn't believe, like, at the end of the first week, of doing this just a couple minutes a day, kinda making up my own techniques as I went along because I'd seen some other things out there, but they were more of trying to distract the dog away from the snake, and I wanted autonomous avoidance. Because I have an acre property where they may not be close to me, where I would be able to see something and tell them to leave it, and so we started doing this, and I was just blown away at how they started, smelling it from far away. They weren't even seeing it. I did stuff where I had cameras recording them outside where I place these scents, and they would go out there and just avoid it. And so, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that we train them to detect about other odors. Why can't we do this with a snake or any other wildlife? I've had other people that have taken my classes and done it for other kinds of wildlife.
Yeah, I know, I mean, I don't personally know her, but I know of a researcher who's trained her dog to find scat, from wild animals because that's what she studies. So usually when we're doing scent detection, we're teaching them to find it and alert, right? So, it's just this extra level of find it and avoid. Do you do it as like a make it a recall cue where like, "Go find mom if you smell
You
this?"
You can. So when I do, like a very basic kind of workshop class for pet parents, that's basically what I do, or they recall it. We make it a lot simpler. With my own dogs, they just turn and move on and move away from it, and that's how I train them because I may not be in that area, I may be further away, and so they're just trained to move away from it and move on. When I work with pet parents, though, it's a go find your owner type thing. And because I don't want them I don't train a specific alert for it because that's one of those things that with alert for something that's not dangerous, that you want them to move closer and make it clearer to you. So,
Yeah.
it's one of those things where if maybe the pet parent misses the alert the first time, the dog's going to get closer to that snake, like, look, see, it's here, it's here. And so that's something I worry about with pet parents missing it. Like a professional trainer, maybe that's different. I think they're probably not going to miss the alert as easily, but with a pet parent, they may not. So we train the dogs just to notice the odor and recall to the owner. And I tell owners that, hey, if you're out hiking, reward your dog anyway for check ins, so they're
Oh,
going to get a reward for that. Yep.
yeah.
Yeah,
Such a
because that's
valuable
often when this
training.
happens. Yeah, because that's often when it happens that people have their dogs off leash hiking somewhere and they do not know where their dog's sticking their nose and, noticing things, and then these bites happen usually to the face or the extremities because they're sticking their face in there. So that way, no alerts or something like that are missed because it's just come back to the owner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let's talk about that for a second, like why the snake bites are so dangerous. You know, I don't know if you have statistics about like how many snake bites there are or how survivable it is, but when you think about like when you're likely to get bit, you're not near your car, probably, right? So how
Yes.
long is it going to take you to get back to your car with your dog, get them to the vet, get that antivenom, and not all vets carry it, right? It's very expensive and it's very
Mhm.
hard to source.
Yeah, that's the problem. A lot of vet clinics don't have it. Even here in Las Vegas, there's only a few clinics that even have the antivenin. And it's very, very expensive. And then sometimes people weren't there and don't even know what type of snake bit their dog. So that's a whole other problem. And you don't want to go trying to catch a snake. But it's a lot deadlier for the owners. I tell people if you see it, take a photo, don't go near it, but otherwise just get your dog into a vet, but like you said, a lot of vets don't even have this. So I tell people that when you're out hiking somewhere to call ahead, to the clinic if you can, if the dog's bitten. So that way, if you suspect that it even could be a rattlesnake, that they can source the antivenom for maybe a sister clinic or another one in the area, or they can tell you, don't come here, go to this other clinic that was nearby. Because time is of the essence. The issue with dogs is that we really don't know how many dogs are bitten because nobody keeps statistics on that. But it's estimated, that there's like, more than 100,000 bites every year from what I'd seen in one study. But what they have seen is that with rattlesnake and coral bites, about 20% of them are fatal for dogs. And that's a whole lot more than with people. So with people, it's like, one out of 1,000 are fatal. Like, it does happen. I know there was one recently in Southern California where some person, the man died. That was, like, shocking because you don't hear about that happening as much, and it was somebody that, was younger and healthier. It's, like, stuff that gets your attention, but the thing with dogs is that 20% of them are fatal, and we have, the Western diamondback rattlesnakes, which are hemotoxic, but then we have those Mojave greens, which are neurotoxic, which is a lot more serious, because that's going to, stop breathing and have a lot more uglier effects that happen faster. So, it's something that's very, very serious with dogs. You don't wanna just wait and find out, whether they're bitten or not. One of my agility students, who's an emergency veterinarian here in Las Vegas, has talked about how sometimes pet owners don't even know if their dog's bitten. Like they've called the emergency clinic before, like, "Hey, we caught up with our dogs on the trail, and they're flinging a snake around in the air, playing with it," because they literally thought this thing is just a toy or something to play with, or some animal that they've killed, and now they're playing with it, and they're like, "We don't know if they're bitten because the fur is so thick," and they're like, "No, your dog we're sure is bitten," and sure enough, they are. So if you don't know, take them in, because sometimes their fur is so thick, like, you just may not be able to tell. Just err on the side of caution because it is that serious. And y there are
Well,
dry
I
bites
was
that
gonna say,
occur,
oh,
but yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say
oh,
there are
yeah.
dry bites that occur, but you don't want to wait and find out because 20%, of those bites are fatal.
Yeah.
You'd rather err on the side of caution.
Yeah. So a dry bite would be they bit, they punctured, but they didn't inject any venom. Um,
Correct, yeah.
so you would see the wound, but yeah, how are you supposed to know if they injected venom? I've heard that the babies are more dangerous because they actually inject more venom, the baby snakes.
That's what I've read too. I've read some conflicting stuff on that. I've read some things saying that they don't, but then I've read a lot of things saying that they're not always consistent with how much they're injecting. So sometimes it's more. And so that's what I've read as well, that sometimes it's more. I've read some other stuff conflicting, but it's one of those things you don't want to wait and find out. You just want to get them into care and because the risk is high, very, very high.
And I wanna point out to people, like so in California here in LA, we do a lot of hiking, and actually, my husband's from Vegas, so we're get to Vegas often. So the desert, where these snakes live, if you're out and hiking and again, like, how far are you away from your car? Can you carry your dog back to the car? Because you do not want your dog run you wanna get back to that car as fast as you can. You don't want your dog to run back because that's gonna increase the circulation and they're gonna spread the venom fastest. So, I have a
Yes.
9-pound dog and a 15-pound dog. I could scoop them up. If you have a 60-pound dog, a 70-pound dog, you should have a plan for carrying that dog if they get hurt. And it's not just a snake bite. They could twist something. They could,
Yes.
strain something and not be able to walk back to the car. So they make, and I do have we just did a first aid episode and we didn't talk about this, but they make slings and harnesses specially made for emergencies to help you carry a large dog in an emergency. So if you are hiking,
I love that.
think about.
People really need to think about that because there've been so many times I've seen on hikes where people have some huge German Shepherd with them and the dog's injured and, really struggling to get back, and there clearly wasn't a game plan because one of those things you don't think about until it actually happens, and, like you said, if
Good,
they
yeah.
yeah, until it's too late, and those things happen so easily. I mean, I've had things happen with my dogs before where they just, move the wrong way on a rock or something, and now they're, like, limping, but they've always been under 30 pounds, but even 30 pounds starts to feel like a real ham, after a few hundred feet. That's a lot.
2 miles from the car.
Yes, exactly.
And by a bee. There's a lot of reasons that you might need to get your dog back to the car. So that's something to think about. So obviously, if it's such a dangerous situation, it's worth investing in this training. Let's touch here a second on the old school training. Because they've been doing this for a while with the shock collars. They show the dog the snake, they shock them. They let the dog smell the snake, they shock them. They rattle the rattle and they shock them. And the idea is
Mhm.
and they justify it. They're like, "Of yes, the dog will be afraid of the snake, and that's what we want, because then they won't get bitten." But it's like you said, if you have an anxious dog even if you don't have an anxious dog, there's just no reason to use fear and pain and intimidation
No,
to touch.
and you Yeah, and you see a lot of times with that training where, fear doesn't equal avoidance. I mean, that's why we see a lot of reactive dogs on leash is they're afraid of something and they're barking at it to go away. Yeah, so I've actually had a few dogs that I've worked with over the years where they were going and attacking snakes after they went through this training. And one of them went through the training again because after they did the training, they went and they were attacking and trying to kill a rattlesnake, got bitten, and the person said it was as they were hunting for the snake. And they didn't do this behavior before the clinic. And then they went and had him get shocked again, thinking, hey, they didn't learn. And then the dog went and did it again. And it was pretty clear that something negative had happened. And I told the owner, and once I just, described it like that, where, some dogs, when they're afraid of something, they're going to tell it to go away and they're going to try to control the situation. We especially see that with some of these guarding breeds that are bred for very independent action. And so for them, they may be afraid, but it doesn't mean they're going to move away from it. Dogs are very different with that. And we also see too, what I see more commonly is where the dog associates that shock experience and the pain and the stress with the snake, but they also associate that with the owner or other things that are in the environment, their harness, their leash, and now they generalize that. And you just don't know which dog's gonna do that and which one isn't. Because obviously, I would never promote shock or use shock for things, but we do see some dogs that come out okay, they seem good enough, they'd be better if they didn't go through that experience.
Really.
Yeah, they're not, utterly like, a basket case, but we see a lot of dogs that are, and you can't tell which ones it's gonna be. And the thing is that we can train all of these things in a way that's actually fun for them, that they're enjoying, and we've seen research studies showing that dogs actually commit things to memory better with dopamine and positive learning experiences by integrating play with it, which is something I do with my training because it's shown that they actually have memory retention better a year later after those training instances when play is used than when just food is used, or and one of them, it was a little bit of a punishment but not physical punishment used, like the dog had to do like a down stay and they weren't allowed to get up and they wanted to. And so, if we see all this stuff showing that we can train this positively and they actually remember it better, why aren't we doing it? You know? And it's one of those the folly of instant gratification that you can go to this 5-minute clinic and your dog's gonna be trained forever, you know? It's one of those things that there's such a small investment of time on the owner's part, but is it really better? It sounds like playing the lottery. Maybe your dog's gonna be great and they won't come out, like, scarred for life, but maybe they will. To me, that's not a risk worth taking when it's something that I could have fun with my dog while training this, and they're actually gonna remember better. Because we used play, we had dopamine and endorphins, just not worth the risk. And there's places that train it. I know in Southern California there are too, because I gave some workshops out there and there's a bunch of trainers like that use my techniques, and then there's some other ones that have been doing it too. Like even before me using some different techniques, but there's a lot of places that do this, if
Yeah.
people look around and find them.
Ken Ramirez with the Karen Pryor Academy did a workshop,
Yes.
I think in this past
Yes.
year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep, Ken
So
Ramirez is doing it, there's, Lynn Webb is doing it down there in, California too, Barbara Davis, Bad Dogs is there in California and doing it, like, there's a lot of
oh,
places
she
that
did
do
my
it.
first aid class. I didn't know she does the rattlesnake.
Yeah, I've given some
Okay.
workshops there for her trainers to learn it, and so they've developed it into their own, like, little training course for pet parents. Yeah, and there's places in Colorado, places in Arizona that do it. Kim Silver does it in Tucson. So yeah, there's a lot of places, but I think that these shock trainers do a lot of great marketing. I think they're maybe a little better than some of us, definitely better than me at it. I'm horrible with all this social media. I'm very tech challenged. But they get a lot of attention, and anything that gives you these promises, these false promises that, oh, your dog's going to be trained in 5 minutes, or, and as if they often try to tell you how gentle it is. Sometimes they don't even tell you that the collar is going to be involved. It's one of those things that it's a folly of instant gratification. Nothing
Really
comes
is.
with that instant, and with no risk.
Yeah. And when you say gentle, when they try to, they're like, oh, it's just like a 10. It's like, they tend to ride a rock collar to work. It
Yes.
has to be an either unpleasant or painful enough experience that the dog finds it punishing.
Oh,
So
yeah.
there's no way that a shock oh, it's just a tinkle, it's just a buzz. That's not the case. That's not the way.
No, it wouldn't work if it was just a tinkle or a buzz, it wouldn't do anything. If anything, that would make the dog wanna come more near the snake if it was something like a TENS machine like they say. I'm like, "That sounds like it feels pleasant," and this is definitely not a pleasant stimulus. And some of the dogs that I have known that have gone through it and they say it was successful, their dogs actually stopped right over top of the snake, and they said that the snake's rattling and they stopped, but they stopped right over top of it. There were 2 different
They
people
didn't
that told me
actually
about that.
move away to safety.
No, they had to call him back, and they stopped right there, and the difference between that and, like, what I do is I train low concentration odor. So, I want my dog to notice it from farther away because, you think about a rabbit, a squirrel, deer, they can smell things that have gone through the area a while ago and things from far away. Like, I mean, I've seen dogs notice that, their friend is, 50 feet or 100 feet across the parking lot with the way the wind's blowing. Dogs can smell things, oh, they have all these olfactory receptors like 300 million compared to our measly like 5 to 10 million. That's how they identify things and explore their environment compared to vision. Because I remember Ken Ramirez, before he ended up doing a lot of more odor for his course, he spent I thought it was like a year. I remember reading about the research where he was trying to do mostly identification through visual, and it didn't work very well. And
Well, he may
but the
hide.
Yeah, and he was trying to do a lot of this identification through visual, looking at, because the thing is that this is species specific, and that's really the limitation of it. And I really appreciated seeing that stuff because, you know, my dogs will avoid rattlesnakes, but they may go up to a snake that's a non-venomous one because it smells different, but they'll avoid the venomous ones that I've trained to. So it would be really awesome if they just avoided all snakes. But that's the same thing with but that's the same problem with, the shock collar ones. They're only going to, stop potentially, maybe, hopefully, we're keeping our fingers crossed, for the ones that are that species. And, so, it's a if we can train the low concentration odor, then they're gonna stop before they're anywhere near that snake. And when my dogs have avoided snakes before, and when I've had students send me photos of their dogs avoiding snakes, they're like 20 or 30 feet away. And it's because, we train to that low concentration odor. I'm not having the dog go right up over top of it and be hovering over it before we cue them to move away. We start training them to that low odor. But in those shot classes, I've seen before, like, videos where people are saying their dog already avoiding it. Yeah, and they, like, push the dog to put their nose on it, and I'm like, "That's just insane." So, the way you train matters, and the way you structure the training session matters just as much as whether you're using reward or punishment. The way you're structuring it is going to shape how that dog perceives what they're supposed to do. And so, rewards, they're gonna remember it better, they're gonna have more fun, and they're not gonna have trauma. But, also low concentration odor is a big thing. And yeah, I think, like, Kim Ramirez is using that recall stuff too. I think that's what he's doing. I thought I heard he's, like, recalling to the crate. I'm not really sure. I've had a few people who took my class and also took his, and I know he's doing the same thing where, also other species. Because a lot of my students have used this for porcupines,
Oh, yeah, skunks would be
yeah, yeah, skunks. Poisonous, toads is the one I've heard people using it for because, you have different things that are dangerous in different parts of the country. So, yeah.
so we've talked about some places people can get it. You might be able to find somebody, depending on where you are that you're listening, you might be able to find someone local, but if not, people can take your course online, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I have a course that's geared specifically for pet parents. Trainers can take it too, but it's really explained in a way that's geared towards pet parents where it's very simplified. It has videos and of me doing each of these steps with the dog, step by step, and then it has explanations on where to get the odors in your area because like I
Okay,
handling
how does parse the odor?
yeah, because like I was mentioning before, it's gotta be to the species that are in your area. And, there's some variability, like, say if it's a, western diamondback, we see a lot of dogs react the same way to a prairie rattlesnake or the southern Pacific rattlesnake. Those are closely related enough that we see similarities, but they're going to react differently with a copperhead versus a rattlesnake, like totally, completely different species. It just smells different to them. So, I have people go to their, or, call their local wildlife or herpetology societies. You can even go on Etsy and people strangely sell shedded snake skins on there. I don't know why. But you see stuff like that, on there. Yeah, but, the best bet is your local, like, wildlife, refuge or herpetology society because they'll keep some of these animals there for education purposes. And then, sometimes they give the shedded skins to school children or local schools, or if you tell them that you're doing this training, they can provide it. Um, rattlesnake removal companies also sometimes keep some of those or
Smart.
for yeah. Yeah, snake removal companies, and then there are some, people who are just really into reptiles. So if you go to those reptile shows, people have all kinds of venomous snakes sometimes and, will usually be happy just to provide them. I've had people just give them to me for free when I say I'm using them to train dogs, so yeah, strangely enough, there are people keeping rattlesnakes as pets. I'm like, "That sounds scary," but each their own.
It's a boa constrictors as pets for sure.
Yeah, I'm like, boas, I get that one, but, like, these venomous ones, it's just crazy. That would scare me, I'd be so nervous to reach in the tank. Uh, but yeah, like, there are places to get them that's not that hard. I've never had somebody take my course and not be able to get, a scent article. I've had a couple people reach out, and I've been able to locate them within a minute or 2, like, it's not been hard. So, it's one of those things that, they do exist, you just have to look in a few areas, but usually your local wildlife refuge, herpetology society, or online like Etsy, eBay, like, people sell these things. 'Cause I guess, they're usually marketed for Wiccan rituals, strangely enough, but, yeah, but sometimes people just buy them too. Yeah, and they have all the different species listed. I don't know. I don't know why, but they're on there, and you just have to ask them that they're unwashed, and typically they are unless,
Oh,
you know
okay.
yeah,
So they keep
'cause you
the
wanna
oil in the scent.
yes. Yeah, that's key, but I've never had where somebody sent me one that, wasn't, unwashed. I never have had that issue, but just, just to be sure. Yeah.
I wanna touch on you said, one of the appeals of the shock collar shock jocks is this instant gratification, this feeling of like, "Oh, it's fast." So let's talk about because I know Dr. Susan Friedman has always said, and I completely agree, that she disputes that positive reinforcement takes longer than punishment.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there. I think they're just good at marketing that, with these like little 5-minute, training sessions because that's how long they allot, for each dog typically is 5 or 10 minutes. And people think they're going to get this amazing thing. But it's like the same we see with these board and trains that, owners are promised that in 2 weeks, if your dog goes to this person's house and they, do their little, e-collar, shock collar, board and train, they're gonna come back with all this knowledge and be a good citizen, and you don't have to do anything, and it's not the case. Usually, they come back with a lot of trauma as well, and they're definitely not well trained, and I don't think that, positive reinforcement takes any longer. I think that they've just really marketed this. And it has this idea in people's head that you don't have to do a lot of work and your dog's going to learn these things so fast. And it's just not the reality. They end up taking people's money and then their dogs come away from it worse off.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Aw
'Cause I find like, things are like I said, within a week, my dogs and I didn't even know what I'm doing. I'm making this up as I go along with the rattlesnake thing, 'cause I had ideas in my mind, but I really wasn't sure what to do with it, and my dogs are doing great, and I was training 3 of them, and we only work 10 minutes a day tops. Like, I'm more of an under trainer than an overtrainer. I try to keep, sessions very short and sweet so that they're so excited for them the next time, and within 10 minutes a day, by the end of a week, they're doing it without me even present. And I'm not out there holding treats like, "Oh, leave it," they're just leaving it. And, my dogs are all very interested in the snake scent at first, because you see occasionally some dogs aren't as interested in it, but some are. All of mine were very interested. And
Do
it's
you
one of
think
those
that makes
things.
them a little easier to train it if they're very interested in it? Or
Not necessarily, because it really depends. Some dogs are just curious, and then some dogs are predatory towards the odor, especially if they've seen one moving around and they associate it with chasing it, like a bunny. Like some dogs, if they've chased bunny rabbits or squirrels before and they smell one, they get excited because they
Mm,
associate it with that chase and that movement. But if they've
mm,
never chased, yeah, squirrels. Yeah, all those squirrels in Southern California. Oh my gosh. Yeah. But then other ones it's guarding, it's something that's on their
mm,
property that they're not so sure about and they wanna go check it out because they're not sure it's supposed to be there. And so I see some dogs that behave differently on property versus seeing one off property. My oldest girl was like that. When she had seen snakes on property before, both venomous and non-venomous, like, she was very interested, compared to and, like, in noticing them, not necessarily always approaching. I remember we saw some non-venomous ones when we lived in Florida before we moved to Nevada, and she was definitely going up to those, and checking them out. And that's why when we moved to Nevada, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I have to do something because they have all these venomous snakes." Um, but when we've seen ones off property, she didn't even acknowledge their existence. But it's something where if they're on property, she felt like, "This is my domain. I'm supposed to protect these boundaries," and, you know, it felt like she was supposed to take action about this. So we do see dogs behave differently in different circumstances. So for them, it was more of a guarding behavior where, they're Kooikerhondjes, a bit territorial. And so they're bred for some of that behavior. So they definitely had a lot of interest, which made it a little harder in some ways. But very eager to please. And I feel like that with most dogs. Most of these dogs, if we can understand why they're interested in it, and we can try to help them feel safe about this thing, and then teach them an alternative behavior that satisfies, like, a need. Like for most dogs, getting to chase or getting to play, like I would throw a ball in the other direction, they chase it, or they chase me away. We teach a recall like that. They learn it so fast, and then they associate that odor as the cue. They smell that light odor concentration and whip around, and then we're running, we're playing, and rewarding it. Yeah, like you said, it's not slower, I don't think, than any of that shock stuff. They just make a lot of big promises that we don't do because we're not allowed to with our ethics organizations. I mean, yeah, like, we're just not allowed to do that, and nor should you, but, I mean, we actually I know IAABC, CCPDT, like, they have rules against, like, making guarantees, but a lot of these other people, they make a lot of guarantees, a lot of false promises.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's a tough, unregulated industry. We are out of time, but is there anything else you want to just really make sure you get to say, like a big misconception that people have, or just anything you want to leave us with before we sign off?
No, I just say, like, don't discount, positive reinforcement. Feel free to look in your area, and if you don't see a trainer, reach out to me or, reach out to another positive reinforcement trainer in your area because I'm sure somebody would be happy to help you find one. And I have my online course. I have my online course, but I know some people like in person, but there are options out there.
Yeah, I'm guessing if you live in an area with a lot of rattlesnakes, there's probably at least one person doing it in your area. Yeah.
Absolutely. We're just not so good with marketing sometimes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all your time.
Oh, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you for listening to the Enlightened Pet Behavior Podcast. I hope you and your beloved pets have found valuable insights for a more harmonious life together. Please remember that this podcast provides educational information only and is not a substitute for professional veterinary or behavioral advice. If you need personalized support, please don't hesitate to contact me and we can explore how we can work together to achieve your pet behavior goals. You can reach me at enlightenedpetbehavior.com or via email at susan@enlightenedpetbehavior.com. This episode was edited by Monty Light. Special thanks to Mac Light for composing the podcast's music. You can find him at maclightsongwriter.com. Treasure those fur babies, and I'll talk to you next time.